The last few years have seen a constant surge in the rise of post-apocalyptic themed TV shows and movies, which holds up a mirror to showcase how broken the world really is. For many of us, the post-pandemic world has mostly been a constant struggle between living in denial or finally embracing acceptance. During the initial release of Sweet Home, which debuted on Netflix amidst a raging pandemic, it served as a much-needed distraction within the quarantine-related infection genre, offering us a respite from the real-world challenges. With its distinctive monster designs, relatable characters, and the initiation of crucial conversations revolving around mental health, the first season captivated a global audience. So after 3 whole years of waiting, as Season 2 of Sweet Home has been released on Netflix, Studio Dragon takes a departure from the original webtoon created by writer Kim Carnby and illustrator Hwang Young-chan to bring us something even grittier, especially with its new roster of spine-chilling monsters. Continuing the narrative seamlessly from where Season 1 concluded, the initial episodes in Sweet Home Season 2 exude a frantic, high-paced energy that rather mirrors the feeling we were encapsulated with back in 2020. Now, given that the monsters are the major goldmine of the show, there are many, and when I say many, there are a few monsters whose screen timings were probably not even more than a second long. Yet the impact their existence left on the plot was rather unnerving. These monsters come in 3 types: red, yellow, and green, depending on their ferocity. But it should be noted that this season has been an evolution in the strain of infection that caused this monster-ridden pandemic in the first place. And while we see other neo-humans or special infected monster humans like Cha Hyun-soo, we also see the new strain turn the humans into monsters within, even if they look nothing like a monster or show any symptoms of being affected on the outside. And to be honest, that deserves a separate video in itself. So in this video, we will explore every ferocious, full-blown monster that appeared in the second season of Sweet Home, and without wasting another second, let's get right to it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The hide-and-seek monster. Humans were much more monstrous than the monsters themselves, and it was proved when this monster came to the scene. With a penchant for playing hide-and-seek from the military, this frog-like monster with a lizard tail was not at all aggressive and was in fact a green-level monster. Also known as the liquor monster, she was unmistakably maternal in nature and was clearly reluctant to inflict any harm upon humans. There's a palpable sense that this creature, much like the womb monster featured in Sweet Home 1, is driven by a protective instinct for its baby. We witnessed that when a young girl was separated from her mother, and the monster went against its initial expectations to scoop her up and reunite her with her distraught mother. Despite its non-aggressive intentions, the monster becomes a focal point of conflict, especially when soldiers discover the baby of this frog-like creature. In a subsequent action-packed sequence within crowded tunnels filled with survivors and paranoid military personnel, the creature attempts to protect its offspring, only to become the unintended catalyst for numerous human casualties, mostly via gunfire, fire, crushing, explosion, and even suicide. This poignant moment serves as a stark reminder that, in the face of the monster threat, it is always human beings who exhibit a callous and savage nature which surpasses the hostile nature of the actual monsters. Tragically, to draw the monster out, a soldier brutally thrusts a metal rod through the baby's chest, leading the distressed mother to rush to its aid. The liquor monster, battered and pursued, meets a heartbreaking end by being burnt to a crisp as it attempts to save its skewered offspring, who narrowly escapes thanks to the compassion of Sergeant Tack, who interprets the monster-killing directive as a measure of self-defense for humans rather than being an indiscriminate purge. The Shopper Monster. Now this monster is a really creepy one, given that once infected, a human's transformation into a monster is ultimately based on their desires. So it is possible that the human being who turned into the Shopper Monster had an insatiable greed for shopping for luxury clothes and bags. Given its ferocity, the Shopper Monster showcases yellow-leveled aggression and was first seen at the mall when the neo-humans Hyun-soo and Hui-myung were having a pretty serious conversation while the latter was trying on some new clothes. Their conversation was interrupted by the screams of a woman who was being chased by what seemed to be a blob of clothes, which later revealed to be an emancipated, four-armed monster who was fired up by its unsatiated desire of luxury goods. Apparently, the Shopper Monster roams around the mall only to collect and drape itself with luxury apparel. This woman seems to be well-dressed and ran with a gigantic luggage full of clothes, so it made sense why she was being aggressively chased by a monster who has a knack for pretty things. Luckily, Hui Myung saved the terrified woman from this monster by using his long, sharp tentacle to pierce through its body and throw it off the balcony, causing the Shopper Monster to collect its hoarded luxury items and run for its life. The Blue-Eyed Monster with razor-sharp knife hands. This scene is rather heart-wrenching and unfolds in the Bomsom Emergency Management Bureau, where the researchers begin an experiment on what they called Sample D-126, post which a timid woman was led inside a dark room accompanied by 3 guards in hazmat suits. After she is left alone, she endearingly calls out for someone named Hui Ji, and soon we get to know that she is the mother of Sample D-126, who volunteered for the test. Hui Ji was a type yellow monster who was actually the victim of online bullying and killed herself in the process. Given that she was already infected by the monster virus, Hui Ji came back to life as a monster with glowing blue eyes and Freddy Krueger-style razor-sharp knives for hands. Her mother comes to find her shoved in the dark corner of the room, visibly scarred of her uncertain surroundings. When Hui Ji's mother approaches her daughter, she is taken aback at her new form. But before she could even hold her daughter, a startled Hui Ji swiftly moves her knife-like hands, only to sever her mother's fingers in the process. While it clearly seemed like she was simply misunderstood and scared, the researchers quickly came to the conclusion that it did not matter how deep the prior relationship was, as it did not make any impact post-monsterization. Although the experiment was an apparent success for them, the mother helplessly watched as the guards came back with flamethrowers to practically barbecue Hui Ji in front of her eyes. The Muscle Monster. This monster was actually seen in a flashback scene from the second episode of Sweet Home 2, when Miss Eam sprung herself on the monster's shoulders in order to protect the children from its murderous mayhem. Unfortunately, the Muscle Monster infected her by inflicting a wound and then banging her petite body on the floor with full force. The Muscle Monster is undoubtedly a type red monster living in Green Home with a rather sinister smile and completely pitch black eyes. He has what seemed like a gazillion layers of thick muscles covering his entire body, and his Hulk-like gigantic size gives him Herculean strength to subdue his attackers. The Blind Monster. The Blind Monster came into action when the evil soldier was about to kill Miss Eam. Given that it is also a red-leveled monster, the Blind Monster killed both the evil soldier and Miss Eam. It has branch-like hands which root out to pierce through its victims, along with a boosted sense of hearing which more than compensates for its loss of vision. It seemed like half of the Blind Monster's face was blown off, which caused its blindness in the first place. But given that it could sense everything in its surroundings by even hearing the shift of the wind, the Blind Monster certainly did not let its deformity stop it. Also, not to forget, the monster did have a pretty jacked physique, even if its features resembled the shapings of a very bloody tree. And of course, not to forget its oversized bat-wing-shaped ears, which boosted the supersonic hearing coupled with its spike bed-like open-brained half face, which made it a pretty menacing monster to look at. After his superior gets killed by the blind monster, Private Chan Young is alerted by the young Young-soo about the monster's super hearing. He starts shooting at the monster only after the rest of the crew at Greenhome have made it to safety. While it seemed that the monster was subdued, when Jae-hwan starts the bus to lead them out of Greenhome, the blind monster immediately starts attacking the bus with all its power, in blind rage. On the other hand, Chan Young is battling another monster, so when the bus is attacked, Jae-hwan decides to leave him behind, propelling the bus forward at full speed, causing the blind monster to yeet out. But that's not all, because now the blind monster has heard Chan Young and extends its root-like hands to attack him, which luckily gets swerved at the last moment when Chan Young throws a rock at its face, allowing him the time to hop on the bus while Eun-yu made sure that Jae-hwan could not get the bus too far away. The Eyeball Monster. Another red-level monster at Greenhome, the Eyeball Monster emerged while Private Chan Young was trying to get the group to safety from the Blind Monster. Honestly, the fact that a blind monster and an eyeball monster were put in the same scene is rather hilarious to me. Anyways, this monster showed itself when Chan Young was firing at the blind monster. It basically ambushed him from behind by wrapping its long snake-like body around Chan Young's. Its entire design is basically two gigantic eyeballs protruding upwards and using its body to move like a snake. While it did try to strangle Chan Young by wrapping itself around like those gigantic snakes in an anaconda movie, Chan Young used his knife to repeatedly stab the monster in one of its eyeballs, which basically made the monster squeal in pain, thus alerting the blind monster, who used its branch-like hands to slice the eyeball monster in two. The Face Monster. Well, if you did not know, before this monster apocalypse was upon them, Jae-hwan was an aspiring actor who suffered from a superiority complex, other than being absolutely obnoxious and self-serving. So given how shallow he really is, there was not much hope for him to fight the strain after the monster virus infected him. As obsessed as he was with his appearance, Jae-hwan became equally ugly after he transformed into a monster. But this is also where we first see the evolution of the monster infection, given that his symptoms did not start with incessant nose bleeding or even take much time to escalate to its ultimate potential. This entire ordeal goes down when Chan Young halts the journey to allow little Young-soo a restroom break. This is when Jae-hwan seizes the opportunity to awaken Soo-young, seeking her opinion on his appearance. To her horror, Soo-young is confronted with the unsettling sight of strange, crusty, gray-colored bubbles covering Jae-hwan's face, triggering a visceral reaction associated with trypophobia. Naturally, a mortified Soo-young attempts to escape Jae-hwan, who is now in the middle of his transformation, as he relentlessly chokes her while repeating his question incessantly. As Soo-young succumbs to unconsciousness, the rest of the occupants on the bus finally wake up to the grim reality, and the old man takes action, shooting at the transformed Jae-hwan and rescuing Soo-young from his clutches. However, Jae-hwan's body undergoes further grotesque mutations, contorting into a nightmarish visage as his facial features shift down to his torso, creating a disturbing and disfigured image. Next we know, the old man pours oil around the bus to light him on fire, but before that, Jae-hwan catches a glimpse of his reflection, which triggers an ear-piercing scream. The pitch of his cries reaches an unbearable height, causing the bus's glass to shatter, and the occupants cover their ears to prevent their eardrums from popping. Despite the chaos, Ji-soo, influenced by her commitment to Eun-hyuk, bravely removes one hand from his ears, seizes a torch, and takes aim at the transformed Jae-hwan. Although Ji-soo permanently loses her ability to hear, she makes sure to send the face monster to fiery hell. The IV Monster. This red-type monster was probably the scariest one in the entire season, and was definitely subject of a monsterization vaccine experiment at the Bomsum Emergency Management Bureau. Apparently, this terrifying guy was actually a cancer patient who was affected by monsterization. We first see the IV monster during the first experiment being conducted on Hyun-soo by Dr. Lim. In this scene, Hyun-soo finds himself subjected to a harrowing ordeal jail as he is stripped naked and sent into a dimly lit room. Driven by a conviction to aid humanity, he seeks guidance from the scientist overseeing the experiments. However, Dr. Lim remains cryptic, instructing Hyun-soo to focus solely on the ongoing experiment, after dousing him in blood, which leads him to encounter the IV monster. Initially, the monster smells the blood and charges at Hyun-soo in combat, who steadfastly refrains from retaliating, maintaining his human form without succumbing to the omniscious transformation that typically accompanies threat-induced aggression. The IV monster, driven by a rabid reaction to blood, sinks its teeth into Hyun-soo's neck. In a surreal twist, Hyun-soo's eyes turn white, and during this transcendent moment, Hyun-soo is granted a glimpse into the monster's human life, which becomes a fleeting montage that seems to evoke a similar vision for the monster itself. This revelation has a profound effect, immediately calming the monster's aggression. It should be noted that a metal collar was hung on Hyun-soo's neck throughout this encounter, symbolizing a form of captivity that this IV monster shatters. Soon, through Hyun-soo, we get to see how the IV monster was once a tennis player who succumbed to a debilitating chronic illness before undergoing the monstrous transformation. Ironically, this monster articulates a simple desire, which is to put an end to the ceaseless pain, which is fulfilled when the guards of the facility use their flamethrower to burn him to a crisp. The BlueEyed Monster. This was a type green monster who probably turned while she was on the verge of getting married. She showed absolutely no signs of aggression and went on with her own business even after being provoked. This monster appeared when we first see the crew platoon soldiers go out to get supplies under their sergeant command. The BlueEyed Monster wore a very dirty and worn-out white flowing gown and had a hunched back, which made it difficult for her to walk, causing her to hover around to look for her lost husband. She carried what seemed like a wedding ring at the tip of her finger and kept frantically searching for it every time it slipped out of her bony hands. Her emancipated body almost made her look like a skeleton. When the soldiers stabbed her with a broken metal rod to classify her type, she simply looked back to stare and then went back to her own business. Although not harmful, the BlueEyed Monster proved to be a good comic relief amongst the soldiers who were teasing one of their men after he was consistently being followed and coddled by this monster, who apparently has a thing for bald men. The Concrete Monster. These are red-leveled monsters who once used to be construction site workers and later transformed into giant monsters wrapped in concrete, cement, mud clumps, nails, and pieces of rebar. They always move in groups in order to protect the Cocoon at the construction site. We first see these monsters in episode 4, when Sang-jin is under a misguided belief that harming Eun-yu would somehow curry favor with Ji, and makes a fateful decision to kill Eun-yu. Manipulating Dong-ji, who is initially content with securing food, Sang-jin persuades him to join the ill-conceived plan and starts opening fire on Eun-yu within the confines of the stadium. In a desperate bid for survival, Eun-yu flees towards a section of the stadium overrun by a menacing group of concrete monsters. Despite her efforts to navigate this dangerous terrain quietly, the relentless monsters detect her presence and start chasing her through the stadium. Although Eun-yu tries her best to outrun them, the monsters finally get to her, given that she was left to fend for herself as she was being overrun by a dozen of these concrete monsters. Just when she thought she was about to die, Eun-yu was saved at the last moment by something or someone, allowing her the window to escape as the concrete monsters are seen falling off from a height. The Monster Kid. Before you guys jump to any conclusions, no, this is not Yi Kyung's daughter, given that she is a special monster and definitely belongs to the monster human list. This Monster Kid was mostly seen hanging out with Ah-yi, Yi Kyung's daughter. Now, it is very much possible that this is a hide-and-seek monster baby, given that it looks almost the same as the monster baby we see in the first season, but we cannot assume for sure it is the same monster baby that Sergeant Tak let go, given that monsters usually develop insanely faster, and by that rate, this baby should have been a fully grown adult a a year later. Anyways, this monster kid always listened to what Ah Yi said and was not necessarily evil, given that it always tried to protect Ah Yi, even if it meant getting shot in the process. We last see of this monster kid when Yi Kyung is almost nearing her end in the fire at her house. The monster kid does everything in its control to save Yi Kyung and fails, but it still does not leave Yi Kyung's side because it thought of her as family. It even tried to put out the flames by rolling on them, but unfortunately lost its consciousness in the process. Later, Hyun-soo rescued it out of the burning ship alongside Yi Kyung. Given that it suffered severe burns, the monster kid probably succumbed to its injuries, as we never see it again in the season. The bike monster. Another type of red monster mostly found in gas stations, the bike monster is made out of clusters of auto parts, road signs, and street lights. They move very fast, in gangs, simply because they were once a part of some biker gang and are apparently extremely reactive towards explosives and smoke. Following the detonation of a mine near the shelter, the deafening sound acts as a catalyst, alerting all nearby monsters who hastily converge toward the stadium. Meanwhile, the Crow platoon, en route after replenishing their ammunition supplies, initially adheres to the plan to head towards the stadium, as directed by their leader, So-jin. However, So-jin, displaying quick thinking, opts for a last-minute change in strategy, and the platoon diverts to a nearby petrol station, orchestrating a calculated explosion to serve as a diversion for the approaching bike monsters. Anticipating the monsters' arrival, they strategically place additional explosives at the petrol station. Even if the detonator malfunctions initially, an undeterred So-jin, displaying remarkable precision, resorts to shooting the bomb, triggering a successful explosion that kills the advancing horde of bike monsters and averts a potential catastrophe. Zebra crossing monster. Given that this monster is only seen for a split second, we do not know much about it, except that it is probably a type yellow monster. When So-jin and his entire team were going back to the petrol pump while being chased by a horde of different types of monsters, their military truck went upon a zebra crossing and a monster was seen camouflaging itself with the zebra crossing. It later rose up to follow the military vehicle only after it crossed upon the monster's body. The waste monster. This monster is another red-leveled monster completely made out of waste materials, concrete clumps, and household appliances. They are apparently the infected humans who are the financially poor residents living near redevelopment areas surrounding Bomsom. The waste monsters also travel in teams and are dedicated to protecting the Cocoon. When Young-hyo and his group embark on a mission to Bomsom to rescue the individual who signaled for help, Dr. Lim, compelled by undisclosed motives, opts to join them, citing a need to check on certain matters. During their journey, the group had to stop when Dr. Lim pretends to have an upset stomach. In reality, he was observing a peculiar transformation process among the monsters, resembling a cocooning phenomenon, and Lim seized this opportunity to collect a fragment from one of those evolving entities, carefully storing it away in his suitcase. This impulsive act, however, triggers a defensive response from the waste monsters in the vicinity, who were fiercely protecting whatever mysterious entity was at the center of this metamorphic process. Despite the escalating tension provoked by Lim's impulsive actions, Young-hyo keenly senses the monster's heightened alertness and manages to guide the group safely away from the area. The Cocoon. The main highlight of the entire season, the Cocoon is an egg-shaped monster shell almost seeming to be in a gestation period. While it is not at all aggressive, it is protected by fiercely aggressive monsters at all times. The Cocoon emerges as a pivotal element in a monster's existence, marking a significant phase in their life cycle characterized by a metamorphosis into humanoid forms resembling evolved monster humans. The beginning of Season 2 unfolds with Eun-yu and her companions encountering another building resident who was originally presumed dead, but has undergone a similar transformation as Eun-hyuk did by the end of the season. This woman emerges from a cocoon, mirroring Eun-hyuk's mysterious evolution. Plus, Dr. Lim's revelations at the conclusion of Season 2 shed light on the cocoon stage as a later aspect of the monster's life cycle, serving as a compelling indication that Eun-hyuk has has indeed transitioned into a monster. Marvelous verdict. While we did not cover the monster humans or the evolved monsters in this list, we certainly covered all ground when it comes to the exciting roster of monstrosities Sweet Home 2 has delivered us with. And when it's your deepest, darkest desire taking a horrendous, abominable form, how can it not be mind-bendingly thrilling? So, which are your top 5 monsters from this list? Let us know in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.